different direction. This was for in its genre, you know, it was taking a sort of different path a little bit for this period, and not the Miles Davis path, but this was May 1970, and this was Red Clay. Born in Indianapolis, influences Miles, Fats Navarro, Clifford Brown. So as you can see, he's a trumpet player. Freddie Hubbard on trumpet, Joe Henderson on tenor sax and flute, Herbie Hancock on electric piano and Hammond organ, Ron Carter on bass, Lenny White on drums. So you got a pretty power-packed ensemble there. So let's get right to it. We're going to round this out with something I've heard before, but it's a great production. Red Clay, Freddie Hubbard and band. Here we go. Okay. Yeah. Intro is fantastic. The lead-in is a little even more subdued than I remember. But obviously it's really where things take off and everyone starts to just open up a little bit. And the song really transforms into this sort of, tight, controlled jam. And as I'm listening to it, I'm sort of realizing like Ron Carter is really he's keeping probably the steadiest out of this, and obviously Herbie Hancock is kind of like, just poking his chords in there, really sporadically, and just his placement is sort of, it's not staying on the beat. He's sort of hitting those little pockets that aren't being jumped into. And Ron Carter really is just keeping the melodic sense really tight, and Lenny White to me is the one that gets to jump out there a little bit, with the rhythms and off rhythms and with the different drums he's hitting. So it's really interesting to hear Ron Carter just keep the pocket, and while Freddie Hubbard is doing his solo, you get to hear Lenny White sort of react in real time, which is fun to hear him. Anyway, I think he's going to jump into either Herbie Hancock's solo here, or I think that's where he's going, but let's check it out. I'm going to rewind it a little bit. What's he doing? All right. So like the tenor, Joe Henderson's going to come in. So that was really interesting because I feel like hearing Herbie solo, it was really, you got to hear sort of Ron Carter and Herbie really perform together, sort of like really mold and meld their lines together a little bit. And Lenny White subdued it a little bit. He kept sort of in the pocket because I think it felt like a really wonderful marriage between Ron Carter and Herbie Hancock, sort of just like playing around together. And listening to it now, and really like hearing Herbie in the moment, he felt a little. He really was like taking chances, he really was like jumping kind of all over the place. He wasn't sticking with these he wasn't building up this long, elaborate, really traditional solo, it felt like he was really just like playing in the moment. And so I don't know how many times this was like, take number 5 or take 15 or whatever. I'm not sure how many times they sort of played this beforehand, but he felt a little tight to me, until maybe the last 30 seconds, where he felt like he was in the pocket of something he was sort of knowing to do. But it was cool, because you rarely hear Herbie sort of not, if you feel like he's unsure, or he's just playing in the moment, and it's not something that's just seamless, just effortless, just virtuosic ability, which obviously he was capable of. So it was cool. It's cool to hear him as as a sideman in this project, or at least I don't know if this was the first album that he had played with Freddie Hubbard. Not the first album, but as a group, I'm not sure where this stood with in this particular album with Freddie Hubbard, but it was cool to hear him sort of what he was doing in the moment. So it sounds like they're going to jump into the next solo with Ron Carter, and let's rewind it a little bit and listen back a little bit more Herbie's last efforts here. All right, that's Red Clay, 1970. Yeah, that was really cool. I haven't heard that. I didn't hear that a lot of times in my life. I've definitely listened to it before. I probably listened to the whole album, a handful of times. And I've heard the CTI version, live version of this that was with some of the same members, and I think they added Airto on percussion and George Benson on guitar, obviously. And that's a very lively version, So this is really cool. I really like listening to it now. What I notice more is that it feels a little. It feels a little it feels like it wasn't done a million times. It was a little. I don't know if they took an early take, so it feels kind of fresh. It doesn't feel like it was overproduced or overplanned or overpracticed. The solos don't feel like they were, there was a sort of beginning, middle, and end. It feels like they were sort of just spur of the moment, real improvised, and took the sort of, not necessarily the bad with the good, but took the sort of searching and experimental and just, feeling things out approach to that. So whether it was Freddie Hubbard, Joe Henderson, that's the one criticism I have is feels like in the solos, each of the solos, I feel like another member, halfway through their solo or 3/4 through their solo, another member sort of started to bring in, enter into the picture a little bit, and maybe in a sense to bring it back into the fold before the next solo. But it felt a little premature sometimes. In Joe Henderson's solo, Herbie Hancock kind of came in, and it felt like with a chord progression or sort of a vamp, that didn't really fit in with Joe Henderson's style. And I felt like Joe Henderson really didn't. In the beginning, he started off kind of strong, but in a sense, I'm not sure where he was going with it. And by the time maybe in a sense, he didn't have a lot of time to sort of, come into this sort of ending, make it feel like there was he was finishing something to say, before Herbie Hancock kind of came in. So it felt like a little unprepared in that sense. And then Herbie Hancock's solo was really cool. Freddie Hubbard's solo was cool. And then really with the Ron Carter solo and Lenny White sort of finished it up, just sort of, bouncing things off a little bit there. That was interesting. But the Ron White solo, yeah, I don't know I feel like they could have left that out completely, honestly. I mean, he obviously brought it back into the intro again, just the bass line to go into the head one more time for the end. But his solo up to that point it felt like it just was in a completely different direction and just kind of brought things down to a level, not performance-wise like bad, but just down to a level that, it was sort of really just unknown territory. Like, I don't know. It just felt like he was putting some material. It didn't sound flushed out with what he was doing, which is a really strange thing to say about Ron Carter, obviously. But as a listener, it just didn't. I mean, I'm not going to mince words or like the emperor has no clothes. It's like it just didn't. I don't know what he was doing. The choices he was making. I don't know. To me, they could have just cut that whole part out and gone right back into the intro again. It would have been tighter. But it doesn't take away from the whole song. It's like whatever. I'll listen to it. Anyway, that's gonna wrap that up. So we went from some Vashti Bunyan right into Freddie Hubbard, some jazz. I guess this would be infusion. So again, I appreciate everyone listening to whatever extent you do. Love some input and explore this music. It's a music appreciation channel. It's a space for anybody's opinion and voice, and it's all for the music, all different styles. So whatever the audience is there, whether it's 5 people or 500 or 500,000 people, this is what it's here for. So appreciate it, and we'll see you on the next go around. Take care.